Dante's discussion.
Welcome back to another edition of Dante's Discussion Questions. That's right, I am back. It's been like months since I've done a Dante's Discussion because honestly, I've been waiting for the DLC to come out for Dark Souls 3. And basically, I wanted to get to some of the questions I want to ask, like, best weapon, best boss, best area, stuff like that. But I can't really do that if not all the areas are out. So I was sort of saving up, and that, of course, holiday season, things got busy, and life, you get it. But I'm here, have the mustache, ready to ask you a new question here, and give you my thoughts on what it is. But for PvP purposes in Dark Souls 3, what do you think is the most important thing? If you could pick one aspect of PvP, what is the most important thing? One thing you should hone your skills on in PvP to become a better player, to become, I guess, more of a winner in a sense. Although winning isn't necessarily everything, because you can beat up somebody the whole match and then maybe they get a lucky parry or something at the end, a desperation parry, if you will, and you lose the match. Now, you still lost the match, but 9 times out of 10 you'd win that match. But that's not what I'm saying. Out of all the things that make up PvP, which there are a ton of things, and even a lot of maybe even intangible things people don't think about, what is the most important thing in PvP? Now, let me give you some examples here. And I always say this about myself. If you watch my videos, tons of my videos, one thing I feel that me personally I am good at is spacing. And I think spacing is one of, if not the most important thing in the game. I mean, understanding the range of weapons, understanding where they can hit you or where they'll miss, trying to close that gap, trying to stay as close as possible and close the timing gap and the spacing gap so you can get that sort of free hit after they whiff or they try to hit you, right? And that's one thing that's very important here is spacing and everything. So with spacing in mind, what does that make you think of? I mean, there's a lot of things. I always said this, and this is one thing I will probably always say, and probably going to be true for, For Honor or Neo or really any game, but it doesn't matter how powerful you are. If you can't hit somebody, you can't win, right? So, in a sense, what is the best thing? What is something you can hone in that makes you the best player in PvP? I mean, you have things like spacing. You have timing, which is extremely important, and a lot of this goes together, obviously. Like, you want to have multiple things clumped together as a player to try to win, to try to be better. What about your build? I mean, there's certain people who, let's say you take a more skilled player and you take a slightly less skilled player. The more skilled player, their build isn't maximized or whatever, but the less skilled player, their build is maximized. I mean, does that make them even in a sense? Does that difference of maximization of the stats, does that make them even? Or does the more skilled player always win at that point? Also, what about the weapon, right? I mean, weapon's got to play an important role. Is the weapon more important than spacing, than timing? Sometimes it is, and it's demented how this game works. This game actually is a little bit different than Dark Souls 2, where Dark Souls 2, a lot of times it didn't necessarily matter what the weapon was. I think it was way more skill-based, personally, than Dark Souls 3. But Dark Souls 3 definitely has a different type of learning curve, I believe, than Dark Souls 2. But it's interesting. So, I mean, I've seen players who, they almost seem like they just bought the game, and they're using Karthus Curve Sword, and they're doing well just because that weapon is so fast, and if you're slightly aggressive, and you can win. I mean, it's interesting how that works. And the same thing sort of goes for a lot of great weapons. Now, I like to be aggressive, and I even lose to people who I don't think they're gonna do one thing because like a great hammer's easy, and then I try to be aggressive, and then they hyper armor me 4 times. They get the 2 hits and then the 2 hits because they just hyper armor through it, and then I lose. And this could have been a guy who just opened up the game and popped it in and was like, oh, let's see how PvP works, and they could beat me because they pressed R1 4 times. I mean, is that something that makes the best PvP player? I mean, what is it? I mean, if I were to hazard a guess, I actually think spacing is probably the top thing that you want to learn first. If you can learn spacing down, hopefully by that point, timing will come in after. And then you get spacing plus timing, which is an extremely deadly combo. But then there's their play style too. I mean, is play style more important? I mean, I know there's players out there who they have a wait and see play style, which kills me, because if you try to be aggressive with them, they run away, and they only try to hit you when it's optimal for them, right? So is the play style more important as far as that is concerned? I mean, you cannot have that great of spacing and timing and still do pretty decent with wait and see. And the same goes for being aggressive. You're super aggressive. All you have to do is get close to someone. You don't even really need spacing. You're the one who's dictating the match. Is that more important? Or is it just spacing? Or is it the weapon? Or is it the build? Is it the armor? You know, what if you do super parries and that's your whole point? Is parrying the most important at that point? I will say this, though. I think if you're relying on really any singular one of these things to help you win, I don't think you're that great of a player. I mean, I've seen people who parry spam to bits. And, of course, I've lost to everybody under the sun. And I think most people have, especially early on in the game. But, you know, I like to play and I like to be aggressive and stupid and whatever. And it's just interesting to think that, like I said earlier, I'm beating up on somebody, destroying them. They don't understand spacing. And then they get a lucky parry. Then they have the Hornet Ring and maybe have the Morion's Blade and Red Tearstone. And then they bring out, you know, I don't know, Smo's Hammer or something. Whatever does most riposte damage. And then they kill me in, like, one shot, right? So does that mean that, you know, they are better than me? I mean, if they got that match and they won that match, is that most important? I don't know. You know, that's why I'm asking you guys in the Dark Souls community. Let me know what you think. Put it in the comments below. Tell me what you think is the most important thing. Most important sort of, I don't know, something you should, if you wanted to learn PvP, this is one thing you should start out with. This is one thing you should really hone down on it. What is it and why is it so? Tell me that. Put it in the comments below. You will be featured in next week's answers portion of this Dante's discussion. Hope to see you there. Can't wait to read what you wrote. Like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me what you think, and I will be back.